The jury is present, sir.
Thank you. You may proceed.
So I'm almost done with the quail pen and the doghouse, but I got to tell you, over lunch, I was thinking about how to demonstrate a little more graphically what you're saying. Your Honor, may I take this weapon out of its box?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. If I keep it pointed upwards. Do you recognize this? Do you know what this is?
Yes.
What is it?
It's the, I think it's like an exemplar 300 blackout rifle.
And this is the weapon, or a weapon like this, that the shooter would have had.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm trying to sort of get a visual of, how about come down here so I don't point at you? Or maybe let me come up there and come this way. Okay? Why don't you get that? I'm sorry. So I'm not 5'2" or 5'4". I think you said 5'2" or 5'4". But position me, tempting, but I don't know how I can do this, so I'm not pointing at somebody. I guess what we do is we need to come back here. Okay, so position me as that shooter would be. I'm trying to figure out where, how would the hold the gun up here, down here, where?
And then you want to push it down on the hip. Your wrist will have to bend.
This wrist?
Right.
Like this?
Yeah, and you could crouch in some sort of a shooter stance, but that's
Not much lower than this.
That's going to be variable. Yes.
Okay, and as I approach the quail pen, the gun has to go up.
It stays the same angle, right? But for different height people, the gun has to get higher and higher, right? Like that.
And if I go backwards, it's got to get lower and lower.
Right, because if you walked up to the quail pen, the hole's 50 inches above the ground, which is right here.
So I'd have to be like that,
Slightly down, right?
like this.
For your height, right? About
No, slightly.
a little bit lower, no, about like that. About
At the quail pen.
at the quail pen. So you can see, if you back up, you have to get lower and lower and lower. Not like, but the gun has to stay the same angle.
Oh, so it's got to be up, but
Up.
I go down
You go down
or get short.
to put the barrel on that green line.
So if I'm 6'4", and you measured Alex's foot to knee,
Right.
so where would this gun be placed on me if I'm 6'4"?
Well, if you're 6'4", your hip is going to be about 46 inches. This will be about right here.
Okay.
It's 46.
Right,
And so you've got your trigger hand
right.
about where your hip is. So it would have to be, your trigger hand is going to have to be up where I'm pinching the tape measure.
And this is how far away from the quail pen?
Well, it could be anywhere, but if you raise it some more, a little bit lower, right? So then, if you're at the quail pen, the hole is right here, right? You can shoot from the hip.
Have to shoot like that?
Yeah, you'd have to shoot lower.
If I'm back where you say the lines converge, I think it has to be pretty low, right?
Yes, it has to be very low. That's why it's to get a position that would be either shooting or aiming,
Right.
or a basic shooting position. You need to be shorter. If you're bending over in some other body position, that may be and maybe somewhat of an awkward shooting position, then you can be taller, right? You can be taller than 5'2" to 5'4".
But his, I think you told us his foot to knee was 25 inches.
25 inches.
And would it be, proportionally for me, where would that?
Fortunately for you, your trigger hand is going to have to be back down where your kneecap is.
Right about here?
About like that, right? And then point upwards 3 degrees. That would be the equivalent of somebody who's 6'4" in the area where the 2-shot lines cross, shooting into the quail pen. They would be holding the gun like that if they were on their feet.
Okay, thank you. Please take a stand. Okay, so based on the angles and the basically trigonometry is what you're saying, you say the shooter would have been between 5'2" and 5'4", and back to have the ejected shells in the appropriate place. You've marked that place on this sketch where these two folks are. That's sort of the range.
Yes, and you can see some of the ejected shells, but they're right beside the body,
Right.
just off where I've got the yellow sticky.
Okay.
That is the area where you have, I believe, 2, 3, and 4. So 3 empty, 300 blackout cases.
Okay. And that would be consistent with the position of the shooters in this position, and based on the angle of the bird cage, cage, they would be somewhere between 5'2" and 5'4".
That is correct.
To have a shot from the hip, the lower part of him, almost crouched down hip.
Yes.
Now, let's move on in our presentation, and I'm going to try to expedite this a little bit and skip some slides because you and I were too detailed when we talked about this, and it's the afternoon. So let's go with the Paul Murdaugh first shot. Tell us what this is.
So this was, these first pictures are from the night of the murders, and that's inside the feed room. On the south wall of the feed room, there's just a regular window.
And what's that?
Those are pellet holes from the buckshot. There are 9 pellets in buckshot, this particular load of buckshot.
Okay. And what did you do?
So what I did was,
Next picture, please.
when I looked at there's the window from the outside of the feed room. When I looked at the crime scene pictures, I noticed that one of the buckshot pellets hit a pine tree, and SLED took a picture of that damage to the bark of the pine tree. And so when I was there, there's like a stand of pine trees that have been planted behind the kennels.
Right.
And so what I did, there are 9 pellets, but the pellets had already spread out by the time they went through the window. In fact, there was 1 pellet still wedged in the windowsill itself.
That you found.
That I found. But there was a tree and it had some ivy on it, but it had damage. And so what I did was I located that damaged tree and put a mark on it. Just put some yellow tape there. I went back in the feed room. If you look at the pictures of the feed room, there are some bloody footprints from tennis shoes. And it's just as I believe it was Chief Deputy Kinsey talked about Paul being about midway in the room. That's the approximate location. So I stood there, but I knew Paul got shot in the chest. So I lowered my head about eye to chest level, and I looked through each hole until I saw the tape on the tree, which is where the sap was coming out, where the pellet had hit it. So I determined which hole in the window belonged to that pellet. And then what I did, instead of using a trajectory rod or laser, it was daytime, I did the old school method, which I stretched a neon pink string from the damage of the tree through the hole in the window out the door, because from what I have understood, this shot was taken within 3 feet or so because there was stippling. on this wound here. So what I did was I basically took the string out as far as you needed to go, and which is what is in that picture there.
This would be that string?
Yes, that is simply a string. It's pulled tight from the sap coming out of the tree where the buckshot pellet hit it through the hole in the window, and then back through the feed room to set up a tripod in the door. So that is the shot line or the trajectory of the pellets in the shotgun. And that's where the damage to the tree is. It's leaking sap.
Okay. And what
And
is this?
that was the hole in the window that if I stood roughly where Paul was shot in the chest, it was the only hole that lined up with that tree.
Okay,
and
what is this?
And that shows basically at the door sill, the threshold of the door to the feed room, the height of the shot, which was at the door sill, it's 3'11".
Okay. Was it on an upward trajectory?
Upward trajectory.
Okay. Next.
And so what I did there is just to demonstrate it, obviously because there's a string there, can't put the barrel right on the string line like we did in the computer with the green lines. I just held it beside it. I'm 5'10". I have normal shoes on here. That's the stance that I would have to take to shoot up that string. So
And at what height would that hit Paul in the chest on that trajectory?
that's like about right at my hip or so. Yeah, maybe just a little bit lower than my hip if you looked at the butt of the gun. And I'm 5'10".
You're how tall?
5'10".
So it's somebody not 5'2" to 5'4", but somebody slightly taller.
Right, or moving the gun up and down again. There's a variable here, of course. Okay. And then what I did was demonstrate, because there have been some, talk, well, that's me standing. Again, I'm fairly comparable in height to Paul Murdaugh. And what I did was I just let the string touch where the wound is in his chest, the entry wound. And if you look where my feet are, you'll see I'm just beyond the door, which is right where the bloody footprints are. So another way of confirming that this all makes sense here.
And those are the bloody footprints?
Those are the bloody footprints. That's about where I'm standing when this picture of me was taken, with the string going through, we're within, a few inches or so. And then the idea there, that would be, inconsistent with, say, somebody my height. I think there's one more picture here just to drive the point home. Like if I shouldered a shotgun and shot into the feed room, that wouldn't work. The gun needs to be lower. So similar concepts as we said before, but just done a different way.
Okay, next. Okay, let's talk a little bit about, before we get into acoustical testing, let's talk a little bit about the second shot on Paul.
Yes.
And I believe you watched my cross-examination of Deputy Kinsey, correct?
Yes.
And his testimony was?
Objection.
Do you remember what his testimony was?
Yes.
Go ahead.
He analyzed the data and the physical evidence, and he was thinking that the shot was about 135 degrees relative to the ground, and maybe plus or minus 5 degrees, and that he took a height for Paul's shoulder about 4'7". He was going between a couple of data points that he had, and so he had 4'7", and then what you have to consider is that basically that's 90 degrees, and then so 135 is here. It's 90 plus 45, so it's a 45-degree angle into the shoulder. But the consideration is that they didn't see any stippling on Paul's shoulder, so you have to back the weapon up. And typically, you're looking at 3 feet or less for stippling. He opined that, well, maybe it was 2 feet because it wouldn't work out. And the reason it wouldn't work out, if you back up a normal size shotgun 3 feet to get no stippling, it puts the butt of the gun under the concrete or through the concrete. So of course that wouldn't work.
Right.
Yeah.
So he had to adjust the distance for stippling.
Right. He said, well, maybe, it didn't work out that way. So maybe 2 feet. The correct way to do that, of course, though, would be to test the shotgun or the ammunition at least, because we don't have the shotgun, but test the ammunition. Does it cause stippling at 3 feet or 2 feet? That would be the correct way to do that. But if you take 3 feet of stippling, which is what the state medical examiner, Ms. Reimer, testified to, if you take 3 feet in a normal size shotgun, that 135 doesn't work because the butt of the gun will be into the concrete, or below the ground.
And I think he and I may have demonstrated that with a little red dot.
Yes, you did a hand-drawn exhibit.
Okay, so you would disagree with his assessment that the 45-degree angle shot was possible with a normal size shotgun, and adopting Dr. Reamer's 3 feet, for there not to be stippling, it'd have to be 3 feet or further, correct?
Correct, it doesn't work out dimensionally.
Okay, so now tell us about acoustical testing, and as briefly as possible.
Okay, so I was asked a question, which is, if a person is in the main house, would they be able to hear gunshots at the kennels? And so the way that you do this is you do acoustical testing, and I could spend a long time talking about this, but you guys probably don't want to hear all of this, but let me just tell you in general how this is done. So what happens is when you have a gunshot is impulsive noise, it's very quick. Gunshot probably only lasts about 10 milliseconds. It's very loud. The threshold of pain is about 140 decibels. Now, when you move 10 decibels, like 140 to 150, it's twice as loud. So you'll see what I recorded these weapons with a special instrument, and you'll see how loud they are. And the idea is that will the sound attenuate, decrease enough when it reaches the house? And there are a lot of considerations. I considered there's a little grove of trees. You don't have a hard reflecting surface. It's pasture and trees and sand. You also have a well-built house, double pane windows, wood paneling. So it's going to have at least a normal sound attenuation properties. In other words, if you shut all your windows, you shut all your doors, there's a noise outside. Depending on how loud that is, you may not hear it. So what I did was I set up testing. It's the same testing. It's called military standard 1474. That the military has concerns about soldiers firing weapons and causing hearing damage. They want to know how often can we send them to the range, or what kind of hearing protection. How many rounds can they fire in a day? That sort of thing. So I just set up the testing. And in a nutshell, the blackout rifle, we got an exemplar blackout, the same ammunition involved in this case. We got a 12-gauge shotgun. We got bird shot. We got buckshot. Basically, the shotgun is around 155 dB.
dB
Is decibel.
Okay.
And when we measure sound, it's not on a regular scale. And the reason is because we can hear, the threshold of human hearing is very, very minor. And then we can hear loud noises like a rock concert. So if it was like a speedometer, your speedometer would have to go to like 0 to 1,000,000. It's not practical. So we make it a log scale. And all you really need to take away from that is that if you have a sound that's 50 dB, 60 dB is twice as loud. That's how we perceive it if you have normal hearing. And then the idea is that, like the background in the courtroom here, there's a little bit of noise going on, but when everybody's quiet, it's probably maybe 45 dB in here, right? So if a sound is 55 dB, we're all going to hear it, no problem. If a sound is like 45 dB, we may not hear it at all unless we're really listening for it. Or if it's a really quiet sound like 25 decibels or 30 decibels, we would never hear it. It's just the same thing as you could be at a rock concert and the person beside you is trying to talk to you and you can't hear them, even though they're talking in a normal voice. You just can't hear them because your background is too high. They're talking in a voice like I am. Without the microphone, it'd be about 70 dB. But your rock concert's 110 dB, right? So all we're doing here is we're comparing sound. I did the testing and also went back and just used the theoretical calculations for the propagation of sound to make sure that my results, which I took on January the 5th of this year, were the same as the results that you would have gotten if you would have done the testing on June the 7th, 2021. You have to take into account humidity, temperature, pressure, the wind direction, those types of things. So I did that.
So what does this slide depict?
So that's an overhead shot of Moselle from the center of the dog kennels, the area where all the evidence is, to the center of the house, the main house at Moselle. It's 1,142 feet, so 1,142 feet.
Okay. But, as the crow flies.
As the crow flies.
Okay, next. And this is looking past the doghouse to the kennels.
Yes, so you're looking towards the kennels. The door on the right end of the kennels is the feed room. That's the area where Paul's body was found. And then the doghouse is there. What I'm showing here is that there is a backdrop to this area, which is vegetation and trees. For reasonably close distances, you have to take into account the vegetation in the trees. At longer distances, the sound can carry, because the sound, when I shoot the gun, the sound is going to expand like you're blowing up a bubble, right? It's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, but the bigger that bubble gets, the weaker it gets, just like the sound. And eventually it goes away.
Next. What does this depict?
That's looking back towards the house to show, you can't see the house here, but that's looking straight back towards the house to show that if you were going to do some calculations, you have to take into account there is a barrier of trees in the way.
Okay, next. All right, what is this device?
All right, that is a sound pressure level meter, and it's a type 1, which is a high precision. Normally, when you're recording sound is somewhat continuous, and you can use a high grade meter. This is a special meter that's designed to capture gunshots, because you're talking 20 microseconds, thousandths of a second, the rise of that pressure wave of shooting a gun. So you have both the gases escaping from the gun, and you have the sonic boom of the bullet leaving the gun. So it's complex noise, and you have to have a meter that is fast enough to catch it, and that's what that meter is. Yes.
Next. What is that?
That's a little weather station I had, so I was recording the weather before and after the testing, because I knew that I was going to go back and pull the weather history for the night of the murders and just see what kind of correction factors needed to be applied to my testing.
Just curiosity, if the humidity was high that night, but low then, how do you adjust that?
Well, there are charts and tables. It's just standard conversion, right? And the humidity was higher in June than it was when I did it in January. The temperature was about the same. Humidity was different.
But you've got tables and charts, calculations, it's physics, or whatever it's.
For the results of this, all of these modifications or adjustments that you would make really don't make a difference, because the results were so far apart. Like what you would have to be able to hear a gunshot inside the house. It really didn't matter. You didn't have to make the corrections for temperature and stuff that I did anyway.
That just shows where you had that instrument set up. Next. Again, picture where the instrument was set up. Next. So why do you have a measuring item there between?
So what you're doing, and so I took a piece of dental floss, tied it to the muzzle, and then anchored it so that I knew that the muzzle was 1 meter, it's a little over a yard from the microphone. And the reason you do that is that, so you fire this gun, and let's say it's 165 dB. So for every doubling of distance, it's going to lose 6 dB, 6 decibels. So at one meter, it's 165. At 2 meters, it's going to be 159. At 4 meters, it's going to be 153, and so on, because every doubling of distance, that's theoretical. Then you have to add correction factors, but that's basically
to
what
ensure that your response is, you're recording your calculations are as accurate as possible.
Correct. I'm just following the MIL standard here.
What standard?
It's a United States military standard.
Yeah, you talked about before. Okay, next. That would be the ammunition you used?
These slides are just showing what I used to do the testing. So this is the 300 blackout.
Next. Is that a 300 blackout
Yes.
bullet? Okay, next. That would be the 300 blackout.
Yes.
Next. That would be the shotgun,
Yes.
12 gauge.
Yes.
Okay, next. That would be the buckshot you used.
Yes.
Next. Okay, and that would be the bird shot, the turkey load bird shot
Yes.
you used, right?
Yes.
Next. And this is the inside of the house?
That's inside the den of the house. And what I did there was I took background readings. In the quiet house, it's really quiet because you're way out in the country there. I mean, there's no traffic. So it was about 35 decibels in the house, which is equivalent to, say, a quiet bedroom.
Do you have the air conditioning on?
I believe the air was working. The refrigerator was running, but it was very quiet.
Okay.
And then so what I did was I set up some equipment there to measure the background. We also, of course, we turned on the TV, normal volume. So that's up around 68 dB, 70 dB, depending on how you want to listen to. We put a movie in and I just had that. So 2 background levels in the house. And then the next question is when you fire a gun at the kennels, do you hear it? Do you not hear it? How loud is it?
Okay, next. So what is that?
Well, we shot the blackout out around the doghouse, and then we shot the shotgun into the feed room, out of the feed room, and then with the muzzle outside the feed room. So we shot into the feed room, we shot out of the feed. So we're just trying to figure out, is there anything about the shape of the feed room that really changes the character of the shot? The takeaway is yes, it muffles the sound if you shoot into the feed room. It's not hard to understand, but the blackout was much louder than the shotgun.
And it was shot over by the doghouse where the shell casing was found.
Yes.
Okay. And that is what you shot in the feed room?
Yes, it's a ballistic gel dummy. It gave us something to shoot into.
Okay. Next. I'm not quite sure what that is.
It's just pictures just showing the testing.
Okay.
Same.
Okay, next. And this is the various indoor and outdoor sound levels. And could you, rather than reading all of this, could you sort of give us an overview of, are these the results of those shots you made?
No, this is just actually just from the literature. If there was a discussion about different decibel levels, but vacuum cleaner 70 decibels.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, quiet conversation 55. A dishwasher in the next room is 50. And on and on. From
Okay.
Loud noises to soft noises.
Next.
I think that's just a blow up of the last slide.
Okay, so what does all that mean?
Just as a comparison to my numbers, these are other people's test numbers, basically done the same way I did it. And you have a bunch of rifles, and they're between, you have 166 decibels, 163, 161, and therefore. So basically your rifles all the way down to a 22, which is like 143 decibel. But if you're shooting a rifle with a decent size cartridge, then you're looking at something from 160 to 165 dB.
Okay, next.
This is a similar chart of other people's work doing the same thing, and for shotguns. And basically, your shotguns are going to be 150 to 160 dB, so not as loud as a rifle.
The quieter.
A little bit
Shotgun.
quieter, but obviously 12 gauge still is a loud gun.
Next. Okay, here's your results.
These are my results. So basically, the blackout was right at 165 dB, and the shotgun was at 155 dB. So the results that I got from the testing were in line with testing that
What
other
other
people
people
have
have
done.
been doing. Okay, next. Okay, so you want us to play this?
Sure.
Go ahead. Wait a second. What is this?
This is an audio file. I could present numbers, graphs, but what I did here just to get the point across, and here's the bottom line. This will be the 300 blackout fired in the loudest direction because we tried north, south, east, west, but this is fired in the loudest direction. I'm sitting in the den, the doors and windows are shut. TV's not on, so it's as quiet as it possibly can be. And I'm sitting there listening for the shot. But you can gauge the sound of the shot. And I got a microphone now, but I'm talking on this audio recording the same way I'm talking right now.
Play it, please.
Okay, I'm ready. I'm gonna give you a countdown, and then you let Michael shoot, and then go ahead and mute your phone, please. 3, 2, 1, shoot. All right, stand by. So
Okay,
it was about 1 second before I said, all right. So you could barely hear it, and we were all listening for it. So if you were in the house, even if you were walking around, you wouldn't hear that. I could barely hear it, and I was listening for it. So what that tells you is that the sound inside the house is right at that background level. It's kind of sitting right in your background of the quiet house. And so if you were doing any kind of activities inside the house, you wouldn't hear it. And certainly if you had the TV on, which will be, remember 10 dB is twice as loud. So it's 35 if you've got the TV on, there's no way you could hear that shot.
So do you have a engineering professional acoustical opinion, more probably than not, as to whether somebody in that house without the TV on, not listening for it, would hear that those shots, those blackout shots down at the dog pen?
I do.
And what is it?
You would not be able to hear it.
And the shotgun, I assume, is quieter, so it'd be even less of an opportunity to hear that.
Yeah. There were times we fired the shotgun in a quiet house and you couldn't hear it at all.
I've got just a few more questions. Any more slides?
I think there's some more slides, but I think we've covered the acoustics, unless you want to get more.
Well,
into it.
I can, no, keep going. I don't think we need to do that. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. That's it? Nope, good. Your Honor, I'd like to offer into evidence a printout of that. I mean, yeah.
No objection.
Submitted without objection.
This would be exhibit number 140. Take $14 just 1 moment. Okay, now let's go to one last matter. And you indicated you've done accident reconstruction.
Yes.
And I have a number of questions about, it's, I guess, all mostly physics. But let me ask you, you've seen this document before. You recognize that?
Yes.
Okay, don't tell me what it is yet. Any objection? This is the, any objection?
Just a question.
this graph is created under your supervision?
Yes.
Okay. And then there's another one, which is 142. Yeah, here we go. So we offer 141 and 142 into evidence. Any objection?
No objections.
Admitted.
So, 42. I'm gonna use these copies. And that's 142. Okay, hold on to both of those. So 141 is speed from Moselle to Alameda. I guess maybe Andy, we don't have that on computer, do we? No. Let me put this on the overhead. Let's start with 141. Can I have the Elmo, please? And okay. So what does this depict?
This is a graph of the speed of Mr. Murdaugh's Suburban, and this is from the trip from Moselle to his parents' house.
And that would be on the night of June 7th?
Yes, and each one of those little vertical lines, the blue lines, represents 3 seconds.
Okay. So, two things. You look at 141, and you look at the time. You look at this correlated. At 9:07, has Mr. Murdaugh left his home?
Well, actually, the one that you've got up is the return trip, I believe.
That's right. What did I give you, 142? What the hell? That's 142. Which one do you want? Good. That's right. On the same sheet of music. Is that better?
Yes, that's 141 there.
Right. And at 9:07, has he left Moselle? Have you independently checked the data behind this and determined where he was at 9:07?
Yes.
Where was he?
On the chart, he would be that first rise there.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of a dip, but then it rises all the way up. It's a little bit over 60 miles an hour there.
Right.
It's right before the dip in the middle. The dip in the middle is when he sent a text message. So just slight slowing. No, back. Right, that little dip right there.
Right.
So 9:07 is going to be right before you get to that dip.
Okay. Hold on one second. I may have not have already did it. So this graph starts at 9:07, does it not?
Yes.
Okay. So it means that he is in Moselle at 9:07?
Yes.
Okay. Questions are confusing. After he leaves there, does he slow down? I mean, after he turns onto the Moselle Highway, does he slow down at all for any point until minutes down the road?
Not until he's down the road. He's building speed. When he passes that, what you just asked, the cell phone location, he's passing through the mid 40s.
Didn't slow down at where Maggie's cell phone is on the side of the road.
Correct.
was actually accelerating a little bit as he went through there, just like, I think 42 to 44 or something like
Objection,
that.
testifying.
I'm sorry.
Sustained.
Is that about right?
Objection sustained.
Okay. So as he drove past, I think you testified that, where Maggie's cell phone was thrown out on the side of the road, tell us approximately what he was doing. Was he accelerating, decelerating, stopping? What was he doing?
He was speeding up. So he's speeding up from, 42, 43, 44, 45 miles per hour as he goes through that area.
Any indication he stopped or slowed down?
No.
Okay. Now, so you study physics, or you actually testify about physics. If someone were throwing a phone from a moving vehicle into, and I believe you went down and looked at the area where the Maggie's phone was found, right?
Yes.
Would there be any, describe for me the kinetics of that? How,
Objection, beyond the scope of his expertise.
beyond the scope of what?
Couldn't hear your objection.
Objection, beyond the scope of his expertise.
Response.
But yes, sir, he is a mechanical engineer. We're talking about a mechanical motion. He's done accident reconstructions where they have to determine the motions of certain objects during that wreck. And perhaps I could even ask him, are you confident you can give us an expert opinion on how a moving object would move if thrown from a moving car?
Sustained objection.
Okay. Now, you've also done, looked at a number of crime scene photos, correct?
Yes.
And you understand where Maggie's body was,
Yes.
and you understand where Paul's body was.
Yes.
Would a vehicle, first of all, tell me the typical headlights, the headlights on a Suburban, how far out would they go? How far out would you be able to see with them?
Well, it depends on the object that you're looking at. Though low beams, modern low beams, which
Low
would be on, you're going to be able to see about 250 feet in front of the vehicle along the ground.
What about the width of the vision?
Yeah, there'll be a spread out to the side as the headlight beam pattern bends around. It maybe 20 feet or so on either side of the vehicle. Depends on whether it's the left or the right, and depends on the color of the objects on the ground. But yes, the area in front of the Suburban would be well lit.
And I believe you saw the Suburban's placement in the photos after the police officers arrived, correct?
Well, yeah, I have seen the photographs, and I also have seen the path that the Suburban took by the GPS points as it drove up to the kennels.
And based on those, do you have an opinion as to whether or not Alex Murdaugh, if he was driving that vehicle, would have been able to see?
Objection, beyond the scope of his expertise.
I need to hear the complete question before entertaining an objection.
Based on your knowledge of the function of the headlights on a motor vehicle, do you ever look at that in terms of motor vehicle accidents that you investigate?
I look at it all the time, car pedestrian accidents.
Okay.
It's a well-known area of study in my field.
So would you be able to give an opinion as to what someone would be able to see with their headlights?
Yes,
You do it all the time.
yes.
So do you have an opinion to a degree of mechanical engineering, more probably than not, whether Alex Murdaugh would have been able to see Paul and Maggie's bodies as he pulled up?
Objection, calls for speculation beyond the scope and no foundation laid for that line of questioning.
I sustain the objection.
Okay. You looked at the photographs of the scene, right?
Yes,
You looked at the GPS data to see where that vehicle pulled initially, right?
yes,
I'm talking about the Suburban.
yes.
You routinely take that same data in a mechanical and not a mechanical, in a motor vehicle accident. You've been qualified to testify about motor vehicle accidents. They agreed to that. Tell me, would someone driving that vehicle been able to see in their headlights the bodies of Paul and Maggie at that GPS location?
And again, I'm going to object, Your Honor. Same thing, calls for speculation.
I overrule the objection.
Go ahead.
Yes, they would definitely be available to be seen. I can't say what Mr. Murdaugh saw, but you're talking about objects that are maybe 25 feet in front of his Suburban and directly in front of his Suburban with low beam headlights on flat level ground. It would illuminate the whole area under the shed, between the shed and the kennels. So his headlights would definitely illuminate that area.
Thank the court's indulgence for a moment. In your career in investigating motor vehicle accidents, have you ever had the opportunity to look at how objects behave if they're thrown from or broken off from a motor vehicle that's in a wreck?
Sure. The most common thing is, say, a motorcycle rider who hits a car and flies through the air. So there are ways that you can analyze the trajectory. Say an object flying through the air at a certain speed, what happens when that object hits the ground? The other thing that you see, like objects coming off trucks. Unfortunately, things come off trucks all the time and they bounce on the highway or fall off and they go through people's windshields. So it's simple ballistics. It's straightforward kinematics of objects moving through some sort of a trajectory. And then also what happens once they strike the ground? How do they slow down? Of course, it depends on the surface, but how does an object slow down once it's flying through the air? Like if a rock comes off a dump truck and the dump truck's going 55, when the rock hits the ground, it's going to be going 55. So it's not just going to stop. It's going to continue traveling until it rolls and tumbles and slows down.
Let me get back to a question. That is, an object this size, the size of my cell phone, if it separated from the vehicle, thrown, fell off or whatever, on a car that's going, whatever the speed limit there, 45 miles an hour, and it heads over to where you saw Maggie's phone found, would it rotate more than 45 degrees in the air?
Objection. Speculation, no foundation laid.
He has studied this. This is what he does.
He studied according to what,
There's no,
which seems to be not in dispute by the state, since he was no challenge to his qualifications in any of the areas that you offered him in. The question is whether this calls for speculation.
are you speculating, or is this based on years of study and physics? I mean, what you do?
No, it would be based on physics.
No speculation there, Your Honor.
You're right. Permission to approach. Permission to approach.
Permission to what, I'm sorry?
Approach.
So I'll stand for a moment. Yes, you can come forward.
Okay, let me see if I can ask this in a very concise way, and then I promise I will sit down. So objects moving from a moving vehicle, or even moving vehicle, like something this size, if it's going through the air and the car is going 45 miles an hour, will it tumble, unless it's a spherical object, will it tumble?
Well, it depends on how it's separated, like you said, from the car or thrown from the car. However it gets away from the car, you need to know that before you know what it's going to do in the air. But the one thing's for sure, it's going to hit the ground at 45 miles per hour, which is 66 feet per second. So as soon as the phone hits the ground, it's going to want to come to a stop, right? So that phone will tumble and slide. If it was just like grass, just like flat grass, it's going to go about 115 to 120 feet. That's how long it's going to take that phone to slow down from 45 miles per hour. In the area where the phone came out, though, there's like some saplings and brush and pine straw. I doubt it went that far, but it would definitely, tumble through the edge of the woods there.
Tilt more than 45 degrees?
Sure.
And when you say tumble, it would tumble, correct? It'd move head over heels, perhaps?
Yes, that's what's going to happen it doesn't have to be a phone, but
Any object.
a brick or anything like that. It's going to roll and tumble. Maybe if the surface is flat enough, it might even slide.
One last question. One line, I just forgot this. You looked at the data on, the speed data on the Suburban returning on the night of the 7th from Alameda to Moselle, correct?
Yes.
And the state mentioned that there are a couple of times where or at least one time where his speed goes up to 80, comes back down, or tell us what's happening with those peaks, the 70 and the 80.
Well, if you look at Exhibit 142, this graph represents the speed. So the higher the peak, the higher the speed. The sharper the peak is the smaller amount of time that he spent at that speed. So like the one in the middle that goes to 80 miles an hour is just for just a second or so, a couple seconds, because each one of those blue lines represents 3 seconds. So what that shows you is that he does reach high speeds on the return trip, but it's not for a long period of time. And that's why basically the average speed of Mr. Murdaugh coming back to Moselle is about the same as what SLED drove it, right? Because you're not really changing the average speed that much, because you're driving faster, but just for little periods of time.
Is that consistent with somebody passing a car?
It could be.
But it's just a up and down. It's not like 80 miles an hour all the way back to Moselle.
That's correct.
Right.
That's correct.
Right, not from Moselle. From Alameda, I apologize. Beg the court's indulgence.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a break now. Please do not discuss the case.
please be seated.
If you bring the jury.
The jury is present, sir.
Hey, yeah, cross-examination.
Good afternoon.
Wanted to begin by going over a few of your qualifications, what we heard about kind of at the beginning of your testimony. Is your practice focused primarily on, would you agree your practice is kind of focused primarily on accident reconstruction?
I would say so, and failure analysis.
And that would be in your advertisements online and your CV that you provided?
Well, probably on a website, we really don't advertise, but definitely on my
The
CV.
website.
Yes,
And most of the work you've done would have been in that field, the accident reconstruction or analyzing things to do with mostly civil litigation. Would that be fair to say?
I would say, yes, that's fair. Most of the work that the company does, company-wide, is civil litigation. And so accident reconstruction, but that's a pretty broad description because, for instance, I have civil engineers, I have biomedical engineers, so they deal with a lot of different subject matters.
And primarily civil litigation, even though it's a broad area, civil litigation.
Exactly.
Very good. And your client today is the defense, is that correct?
Yes.
And you were retained by them. When were you retained?
Jim Griffin called me, I want to say it was about the middle of September of 2022.
And I know we've seen your PowerPoint. Did you, is that your report or did you prepare a separate report for defense?
The written report that I did in this case was on the acoustics testing, but the PowerPoint was just trying to pull, it's a big file, of course, but just trying to pull it all into one place.
Did you provide any additional reports to defense or was the PowerPoint the only one?
Just the PowerPoint, and then I had maybe a 4 to 5 page report on the results of the acoustics testing.
And when did you finalize your PowerPoint that we just saw today?
In its final form, that would have been yesterday.
So you finalized your PowerPoint one day before your trial?
Yes.
Is that standard for you to do?
Yes.
All right. And what's your how much are you getting paid for your services?
So the company charges $3.50 an hour for my time.
And how many hours have you worked on this case?
Oh, Lord. A lot. I couldn't give you an idea, but I made 2 trips down here. I've been to Moselle twice. I read through a bunch of documents, studied pictures forever. Got ready for trial. Of course, that took a while. I would probably say that I have, somewhere between 40, 50 hours in this case.
40 to 50? Is that your estimate?
I would think so.
And travel incurs additional expenses. Is that why you kind of mentioned it separately?
It does, yes. So, the company charges anytime I'm traveling or working.
Have you ever done any work for the law firm formerly known as PMPED?
No, because I've been doing this for so long, and I do a lot of railroad cases, have been on the other side of that law firm, and I've been deposed, like on the other side. They took my deposition. I was on the other side working for a defendant, but I've never worked for them directly, like say a personal injury case or a wreck case.
Have you ever been retained to work on the boat case?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Tell me about that. What was your retention for the boat case? And by the boat case, which one are you referring? Which one? What do you understand that to be?
Well, the boat case, the Maori Beach case, so the one that occurred down at Paris Island. So I do boat accidents. I do small vessel, watercraft, jet skis. I've actually worked on ship accidents, ship collisions before. So I do a lot of maritime and boat accident work. And I was called by Jim Griffin a few years ago. It would have been probably, within a few months of that accident. And I did an investigation of the boat crash.
Do your services also include a retainer? Like, is there some sort of retainer to work off of before the hourly billing kicks in?
No, our company is pretty simple. We just bill by the hour. So we don't do contracts or retainers. Some people in my field of work do.
So you were originally retained by Mr. Griffin for the boat case to do a boat reconstruction. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And that would be in line with your, what you primarily do with your services at your firm. Is that fair to say?
Yes, that just falls underneath physics, mechanical engineering. Anything based in physics has the potential for being explained, and that's what I do.
All right, and I know your educational background is in engineering. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I want to talk about a few things we can maybe agree on. And engineering is a field that, would you agree? Engineering is a field that is based in science. Would you
Yes.
agree with that?
Yes.
Would you agree that engineering is a field that's based in some math? Is that fair to say?
There's a lot of math and engineering. Yes.
We heard a lot about trigonometry and angles. I mean, math, right?
Yes.
Engineering's based a lot of is based in hard facts. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
And engineering, some of the things that really have no business in engineering would be guesswork. Is that fair to say?
Well, in engineering, you can sometimes make assumptions and then make guesses, but you always have to go back and test them, right? You develop what we call them hypothesis, right? So you look at the problem, you try to figure out what the problem is. You form a hypothesis, and then you test it. So, you might say, well, I think this. And then you either mathematically or physically test it.
Okay. Going back to that question about guesswork, though, because I don't know that you answered it. In engineering, is it important not to use guesswork in making opinions?
Right. If I give an opinion, I'm not guessing. So whenever I give an opinion, there is a foundation based on my education, experience, and training for me to give that opinion.
So if an opinion's rendered and there's variables that aren't considered, would you consider that to be guesswork?
Well, it depends on how important the variables are. I mean, any engineer in any analysis procedure, there could be lots of variables that don't matter. But if the variable matters, then of course, that would affect your opinion.
And in engineering, and we're thinking of, I think you said you're a mechanical engineer
Yes.
by trade, by education.
Yes.
So do mechanical engineers engage in speculation?
Not in the context of giving opinions.
Okay. And do mechanical engineers, when whatever they're engineering or whatever they're opining about, do they base their opinion on assumptions?
Not primarily, not even really. Your opinions can't be based on assumptions. Now, there can be aspects of your analysis that you have to test, but whether it's an assumption or a guess, that does not make for a good engineering opinion.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Are you a member of have you had any formal training in pathology?
No.
Have you had any formal training in firearms or firearms, how they work?
No.
Are you a member of any organizations that do that line of work, that do tests on firearms or pathology?
No,
Have you taken any shooting incident reconstruction classes?
no,
Do you have any certifications in shooting incident and reconstruction?
no,
Have you taken any classes in gunshot wounds?
no,
Have you ever done any studies on bullet trajectory from out of the muzzle of a gun?
yes.
Okay. What studies have you done?
I've done all kinds of testing.
All right. Such as?
For instance, one time I had a case, it was a murder case where a person was shot through their car door and was shot with a .357 Magnum. And the door had maybe 6 bullet holes, and each of the bullet holes had different characteristics. So I went to the junkyard and got 25 to 30 of these doors. And I spent a couple of weeks shooting that door with a .357 Magnum at different angles, different distances, until I could replicate the bullet holes in the actual, in the door. So what you're doing there is that you have a door as evidence, and then you're trying to figure out, okay, what does that tell you? Not the same as what I talked about today, but similar. I had a case one time where there were 2 deer hunters in the woods and one got shot at long range. So we did a lot of long range ballistic testing of the ammunition in the firearm to determine the drop distance of the bullet and to understand where the one hunter would have to aim the weapon. I have done proximity testing with firearms by looking at the stippling. So in other words, I have a rig that I can put a pistol in, and then I put target. A lot of times I use sheetrock. And then what I do is I fire the gun at increments back and look at the pattern of the stippling. Sometimes you'll get soot and stippling, and sometimes that. So it would all be testing within the context of the cases. You know, when I get involved in a firearms case, those are the types of things types of tests that I would do. It's just a general part of our business. When we get presented with an engineering problem, we do testing.
And those testing, any of those studies that you did, were they subject to peer review or published in any publication?
No, I typically don't write papers or submit papers. I do the work.
So it's you doing a test on your own? Is
Yes.
that right? That's what it is?
Yes, or with, of course, people in my office
With
help.
your office?
Yes.
And are you a member of the International Association for Identifications,
No,
Firearms Identifications?
no.
You have any certifications along those lines whatsoever?
No, I'm not a firearms expert or a pathologist or a wound expert. That's not my area of physics. It's not my area of expertise.
Okay. So is it fair to say then any opinion you rendered on relating to firearms, we shouldn't rely on it then?
That's not what I said.
Okay.
If it's related to exterior ballistics and terminal ballistics, then
We're gonna
yeah,
go
you
through
can
it.
certainly rely upon it. But I'm not going to testify about wounds or pathology or anything like that, and I haven't.
All right, I want to start with the cell phone. I think we ended on the last slide. The charts. I don't know where those are. Yeah. I'm showing you Defense Exhibit 141 and 142. I believe you testified. Can I have the? Oh, sorry. I believe you testified that you created these graphs. Is that right?
No, I didn't. This is an Excel graph from the data. So it's just the raw data that was presented to me.
All right. Well, who created it then?
I'm not sure. I just reviewed it. I'm not sure who did this.
All right. Well, can you tell me? I think you testified before that well, show me the time, if you would, and permission for the witness to come down. Show me the time that you indicated the phone was thrown from the car, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, I got it specifically on my laptop, but I can show you in general. It's up to you. I mean,
Well, this isn't evidence, so I'm asking for you to come down and identify on here where it is.
You want to know where the car passed, where the phone was?
Just for clarification, yeah, 1 second, sorry. Just for clarification, we're looking at this chart. What is this showing us?
That is a graph of the speed of the Suburban versus time. So speed is on the y-axis, or this is speed, and then that's time. So time's going that way. And as car speeds up, the line gets taller.
Okay. And it says total time 16 minutes. What does that refer to?
That's the time it took to drive from Moselle to the parents.
Okay, and the sled, and then it says next to that sled test drive during day. What does that indicate?
What that is it's just comparing. It took 16 minutes, Mr. Murdaugh, and then Sled did the same drive, not at nighttime, but during the day, and took 17.58 minutes.
Okay. All right. So as I was saying before, I think you testified. You said you indicated a point where the cell phone had been thrown from the vehicle, or at least the time correlation. Could you please identify where that is for us?
No, that's not what I said.
All right, well, what did you say then?
I said that when the car passes the location.
Okay.
Right. I
Sorry.
don't have any information about.
When the car passes the location, where is it indicated?
I think it's that line right there.
Okay. And you say you think. Why is it that you think?
Well, it's not labeled, but it's on my laptop. I'd be glad to get my laptop.
Well, this is an evidence, and this is what the jury's going to consider. So I'd prefer to work on this.
Objection. He has indicated he has a specific date on his laptop. If he wants the real answer, he'll be happy to walk to his laptop and get it for him. He says he's looked at this. That's where it is. I mean, he's asked the question 3 times. He's answered 3 times.
Cross-examination, you may proceed.
You're not able to find it on here, are you? Looking at this chart.
Well, it's either this line right there. I think it's this one or this one.
All right. Does engineering engage in I thinks and maybes?
Let me get my laptop.
Well, I'm just asking you, can you identify it on this chart?
Well, I mean, this is a really big file.
Your Honor, I'd ask the witness to please answer the question.
Well, I will answer it, but I don't have the whole file memorized, so let me just look at it for you. That way we'll know the answer.
Can you point it out on this chart without reviewing whatever you're about to review on your laptop?
No.
Okay. Can you identify 912 on this chart without reviewing anything you're about to review on your laptop?
Well, I mean, you want me to answer the first question?
You answered it. You said no. Can you identify where on 912 on this chart is?
No, they're not.
Okay.
It doesn't have any numbers written down.
Thank you. Can you identify where 920 is on this chart?
Well, hold on. You want me to answer your questions? You want me to answer the first question?
The questions, please. Can you identify where 920 is on this chart?
No, because there are no numbers on this, but it's.
And can you identify where 952?
Just his answer.
Let's give the witness an opportunity to answer the question.
Can you identify where 952 is on this chart?
Not specifically.
Okay, thank you. You can, I don't need it. I'm showing you what's been marked as defense exhibit 142, and same thing. There's no numbers. There's no times on here either, right?
No, not on the x-axis at the bottom.
Switch to the PowerPoint, please. All right, you gave an opinion on objects being thrown, ejected, traveling at what was posited to you as 45 miles an hour. Do you remember that
Yes.
opinion? What are some variables, and you're an engineer with math background, what are some variables you would need to know before determining the distance, trajectory, and speed of an object?
Like is the hypothetical if somebody threw a phone out of a window?
My hypothetical is, in order to determine the speed of any object, what are some variables that you would need to know in order to determine the distance it was thrown, the trajectory it was thrown, and the speed at which it was thrown? What are some information that you would need to know in order to posit an opinion about that?
Well, there would be a lot of variables, but the main ones would be, and I think I understand your question, but let's say you find an object on the side of the road and you want to know how fast, let's just assume that somebody throws something out of a car that's driving down the road. And let's say this would be a typical problem people ask me or we're presented with. It's like, well, can you calculate based on the physical evidence on the side of the road. How fast was the car traveling when the phone was thrown out? I mean, let's just look at it that way. So what you would need to know, like, let's say that it was on the shoulder of a road and there was like an impact mark on the shoulder of the road. And then 57 feet later is the phone, right? So you could make a pretty good determination the phone tumbled 57 feet. Well, a tumbling object decelerates at about a half a G. That's 11 miles per hour per second. So over 57 feet, you could back calculate it. You're going to come up with something probably like 30 miles per hour, right? The variables would be the condition of the shoulder, obviously the speed that it's thrown out,
Okay.
right?
Energy, right?
Right, because for instance, if you're driving down the road, you could throw it forward, you could throw it backwards. So you may want to add the speed or subtract the speed from the velocity of the vehicle.
And I'm gonna let you keep going, but just,
Trying to answer the question, interrupted again.
Were you through answering that question?
I think so. I think that's probably.
All right, next question.
all right, about the strength, I think you said strength of the throw. Is that what you were talking about when we last cut?
Well,
Variables.
right, because if you just drop the phone from the car, it has zero initial velocity relative to the car, but the car has relative velocity to the road. So for instance, it's going to have a different trajectory if you throw it straight down out your window than it would be if you throw it up in the air or throw it sideways. Those are all what's called initial conditions. And so, but if you had information, let's say you had a witness in the passenger seat that said, well, he tossed it straight out of the window, then you could calculate it that way, but you would need more information. So it's, to know specifically this type of problem, you would need to know a lot of different information to get like if you said, how fast is this car going based on how far that phone tumbled down the street? Yeah, you would need to know some more information.
So you need to know the energy thrown, energy at which the object was thrown, correct?
Yeah, so the speed.
Would you need to know the mass of the object that was thrown?
No,
That wouldn't matter?
no,
Would you need to know the wind resistance, if any?
yes.
Would you need to know the wind speed, if any?
It depends on the problem, but that might be a factor.
And absent any of those variables, really can't tell anything about an object that was thrown. Is that fair to say?
Well, it depends on the question that's asked. If you were asking me the question, how fast were the car going, then yes, you would need all those variables unless you wanted a wide range of answers. But if you ask me, if you toss a phone at near highway speed or close to highway speed, will it tumble? It's a completely different question. There's no variables there. That's just fact.
Okay. And while this may be obvious, I'm going to show you what's been marked, or what's been entered into evidence as State's Exhibit 230. I'm sorry. I keep doing that to you. Is this the side of the? Is this the side of the road that you visited?
It looks like it.
Does that look like it also? States, sorry, I'm showing you States 231.
Yes, I know there's woods on the east side and there's an open field on the west side.
I'll just do the old fashioned. And does that look like a shot from the side of the road that you visited on Moselle?
Yes.
And what are we seeing here in the background? What are we seeing?
Well, in the background, there's the field that's over on the west side of it.
All right, in front of the field, what is that?
That's the roadway,
Okay, and in front of that road, right in front of the road on the picture, the green stuff.
grass shoulder.
All right, and then near at the bottom of the screen, what are we seeing?
It's like vegetation, leaves, sticks.
You'd agree that leaves and grass is fairly soft. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Showing you what's been entered as 232. Different angles. That look at the same road to you?
Yes, that's looking basically north.
And again, grass, right? On the side of the road.
Yes, that's on the west shoulder.
All right. When you do sound studies, have you done work? Is it primarily for like OSHA related things? Or I know you mentioned some companies. Is that what the sound studies have primarily been for?
It's typically the work that I do now.
Is the sound studies?
Yes, the acoustics measurements that I do typically would be related to train whistles, train horns, emergency vehicles, backup alarms where, say, somebody gets backed over with a truck, audibility of back alarms. I've had audibility of warning alarms inside of a factory. Like, could a worker hear the alarm and then get out of an area that was dangerous? So it's usually emergency signals is typical. I have worked on a criminal case where it wasn't a gunshot, it was a woman screaming. And could a particular, they call them ear witnesses instead of eyewitnesses, but could a particular ear witness hear a woman screaming at a distance? So,
And it would that be for workplace considerations? There was some accident at work and it maybe relates to OSHA?
now this was a murder case.
Oh,
So
the other things you mentioned previously, sorry.
no, the other ones, typically are going to be civil litigation where, you might have a dump truck manufacturer getting sued for not having an audible alarm that's, loud enough or just plain, or sometimes what happens in a car accident, but like a back over accident, they're saying that the person that got run over should have heard the truck coming and got out of the way, right? So people argue back and forth about who could hear and not hear like a backup alarm.
I'm going to direct your attention now to the sound study that you conducted, and it was in your PowerPoint of your defense exhibit. Referring to defense exhibit 140, and I guess digitally 143. All right, if you could please to page, I believe 75 or exhibit 76. Okay, there you go. All right, and remind me again, and I know it's visual there, but what's the distance between the dog kennels and the house right there?
Straight line distance is 142 feet.
1,140.
Oh, what did I say?
I think you said 140.
Oh, yeah, no,
1,000.
it's like 1,150 feet. Let's just call it 1,150. 1,150.
All right. And that's as the crow flies, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, please continue over to exhibits. If you just fast forward for me, sorry, I'm trying to find the number. Exhibit 1, just if you keep going, I'll stop you on the 300 blackout. All right, this ammunition, what kind of ammunition is that?
300 blackout, 147 grain, full metal jacket.
Okay, and do you know who the manufacturer of that is?
It looks like Cellier and Below.
All right. And that's the ammunition you used on the 300 blackout test?
Yes.
All right, if you would fast forward a couple. And this is this your rifle?
No.
Is this a person's rifle that was working for you?
No. This was a law. The lawyer Jim Griffin provided the two weapons.
Okay. Did you yourself actually fire these weapons?
No, an engineer in my office. His name's Michael Whitley. So since I was running the acoustic equipment up in the house, then Michael Whitley was the one that actually pulled the trigger.
And are you familiar with this type of firearm?
Yes.
All right, what is that?
Well, it's a 300 blackout, which is the name of the ammunition. And so basically what it is an AR-15 style rifle with a shorter barrel. And when they shortened the barrel, they needed a specially designed ammo for it, so it would be efficient. In other words, it's the type of weapon that might be used in close quarters, so it's shorter and you can move around and maneuver. But when you cut the barrel down to say 8 or 9 inches, you need to chamber a different round. That's basically what this is.
And is it actually, are you aware it's actually considered a pistol for purposes of government identifications?
I don't know if this particular one is considered a pistol or not. Like I said, I'm not a gun expert, but
That's fine.
yeah.
All right, if you would please fast forward to, there you go. All right, this reverse one, please. Thank you. All right, this picture, what are we looking at?
That's the ammunition. That's the buckshot that we used.
All right, and is there a reason you chose this particular brand?
The Winchester was similar to the brand of ammunition used.
What kind of ammunition is this type?
It's a 12 gauge buckshot. It's like 2 3/4 inch shells. I want to say that the buckshot in the murder was maybe a 3-inch shell, but this is a similar load.
So similar, but not the same,
That's correct.
and not the same manufacturer.
I think it was Federal. I'd have to go back and look, but I think there was Federal and maybe Winchester. The reason is just because I know that the plastic shot cups were found at the crime scene, and I think that's Winchester. But I would have to go look.
Okay, so but you concede you didn't use the same gauge for buckshot as was used in the murder of Paul Murdaugh.
No, it's probably slightly different.
All right, if you would please continue to Exhibit 7. And again, what do we have here?
That would be the turkey load or bird shot with the smaller pellets that we used.
And again, this is not the same load that was used in the murder of Paul Murdaugh.
I don't think it's the exact same. It's just representative.
All right. All right, if you would please go to Exhibit 24. I think it's like 2 or 3 slides. There you go, right there. Thank you. All right, and again, this is the interior of the house at Mizell. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I believe you already testified to it, but what was the ambient decibel reading inside that house?
35 decibels. Pretty much steady state.
And is that, well, I guess we heard an audio clip, right?
Yes.
That we played for the jury. Does the ability to hear something, is it affected by the ambient noise?
Yes.
In a
That's
room?
what. Yes.
Did you do a test on what the ambient noise is in this courtroom?
No, I can do it right now if you want me to.
Did you do it before? Does the ambient noise have an effect on how we hear something?
Yes, that's what I explained. So in order for you to be able to clearly hear something, it's got to be 10 decibels above background.
And we've
If it's
heard,
10 decibels below background, you're not going to be able to hear it. And when you're in between, it depends on if you're listening for it. Like if you're really listening for something, like if you're at a train crossing and you're listening for the train horn, it could be right at the background level, like you got the radio on a little bit. The train horn could be right at the background level, but since you're listening for it, you might be able to hear it. If you're not paying attention, then you might not. But if it's 10 decibels above your background, you will hear it. 10 decibels below, you're not going to hear it because it's twice as loud or twice as soft.
and it sounds relative, and I know you gave an example of the concert. How did you decide, or how did anyone decide what volume to play that sound clip? Would volume affect your ability to hear something?
It does, but it really wouldn't matter because again, the shot from the kennels was only 1 to 3 dB above background. So it was about, 36, 37, 38 decibels. And even if you rustle a piece of paper, that could be in the 50s. And so it doesn't really, in this case, the volume of the TV, it really didn't matter just because the sound of the gun inside that house is so faint, it wouldn't make a difference.
All right, and I know this may be outside your expertise, but just asking you common sense. Are you aware that trees generally grow?
Yes.
So remind me again, what day did you go out and perform these sound tests?
The sound tests were January 5 of this year, so 23.
And I know we have some pictures. If you wouldn't mind backing it up to Exhibit 14. It's the closest representation I could find. Okay, right there is fine. Sorry. Would this tree line on the back of picture Exhibit 10 be consistent with what you saw in January?
Yes, that is January.
Okay. And are you aware of what the date of the murder was?
Well, that's June the 7th of 21. So basically, this picture's taken, let's say, 18 months later, 19 months later.
And I think you did testify that sounds, because speed travels in a straight line, sound would be affected by the tree line. Is that correct?
It will be on the other side of the tree line. It's also going straight up too. It's like I said before, it's like a big half bubble getting bigger. The trees probably obviously did grow in the year and a half when it happened. And I did make correction for the trees, but it was only, I think it was 1.7 dB, if I recall. But so the trees made a difference, but not that big of a difference.
Well, without being there and whatever the tree height would that have an effect on the sound level? I mean, I think you said you accommodated 1.7 dB, but will you agree that the height of a tree or a forest would have an effect on the sound?
Oh, it'll have an effect, but in this case, it's two. Let's just call it 2 decibels. And what I'm talking about is, background inside the house. If you have the TV on, is like 70 decibels, right? So we're comparing 35 or 40 decibels. Whether we add or subtract 2, it makes no difference because you got 70 versus 30 or 40. And remember, just 10 decibels is twice as loud. So 70 decibels is many, many times louder. So I went through the process of making sure that the numbers were correct, but minor variables such as wind, humidity, wind speed, the trees, all of those, even if you factored all of those in, it really doesn't make a difference just because the gunshot inside the house was so faint that you're just not going to hear it.
All right, sir, if you wouldn't mind turning to Exhibit 25, please. It would be toward the end, forward. It's a chart. Yeah, the next one. Next one, if you wouldn't mind, this chart. Okay. What's the decibels of a vacuum cleaner at 3 meters and a gas lawnmower at 30 meters? What's the decibel rating on that?
70.
Be 70?
Yes.
And you said the TV was at 70?
68 to 70.
So the same as a vacuum cleaner running and a gas lawnmower?
Well, the lawnmower is what, at 30 meters, which is, that's,
Just
100
check.
feet. It must be a pretty quiet vacuum cleaner because in my experience, a vacuum cleaner is a lot louder than 70 decibels.
What was the decibel reading that you measured for the shotgun blast again?
Around 154, I believe. It's on the next slide.
And what was the reading for the rifle?
165.
I think you talked about extrapolation. You know what I'm referring to? Extrapolating the sound over distance.
Yes.
Okay. And I think you said, but the sound dissipates 6 decibels for every twice the distance. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Is that accurate?
Yes.
And that's what you testified to.
Yes.
So if you wouldn't mind, could you extrapolate for me So at 165, which is what the rifle tested at, could you reverse extrapolate that to 1,024 feet? Could you do the math?
Yes, I have that. Well, it's actually a slide, but I've got the chart, if you give me a second. Okay. So what I did was, when you add in the attenuation, what distance do you want to know?
1,024 feet?
So basically just like outside the house?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just the basic
Okay,
definition.
so because of the weather conditions, I adjusted the number up for, I'm assuming we want to talk about the night of the murders, right?
I just want to know if you could if you could extrapolate. I don't want to know about weather conditions or anything right now. I just want to extrapolate 165 decibels beginning at, 3 feet beginning at 3 feet. And then I want to extrapolate it to 1,024 feet. And those are even numbers.
It's 89.5 decibels.
Could you repeat that, please?
Yes, 89.5 decibels. Let's just say you're just right outside the house.
Wait, what are you saying? Right outside the house?
Yes. Inside the house, it's in my other report. Inside the house, it was maybe 35 to 38 decibels inside the house.
I'll come back to that. I don't want to know inside the house, outside the house. I just want to know in a lab setting, you have a 165 decibel blast.
Right.
Measured at 3 feet. So 165 decibels at 3 feet. If you extrapolated that out for distance, what would the decibel be? Just lab setting.
Lab
What
setting.
would the mathematical equation be?
Well, it would be a little bit different in a lab setting. This is not a lab setting. But if you did, you go, I don't have that written out. You may have already done it, but if you take 3 feet,
Would you disagree? Let me ask you this, and it's not a trick question. Lab setting, we can put all the qualifications in, but would it be at 1,024 feet? Would you have any reason to doubt that it would be at 105 decibels?
that sounds about right. I think I did that at one point in time and got about the same number you did.
And if you wouldn't mind, what is your chart indicating is 105 decibels?
Let's see.
Just what the chart says.
It says jet flight at 300 meters, which is basically 1,000 feet.
Thank you. Would you agree that a cat's meowing or a cat is fairly low on the decibel meter?
Yes.
Certainly if a cat was outside and you're inside, fairly low, hard to hear. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, unless the window's open.
All right. I'm going to reverse and now go to, if you wouldn't mind, starting at page or exhibit 57. Does it go backwards? Yeah, you have to keep going. Just the first part of this. There we go. Thank you. All right. Referring to your exhibit 57 on your PowerPoint, I know you testified to, but are you familiar with what this image shows?
Yes.
All right. And this is the feed room with a view of the window. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And this is not a picture you took. Is that fair to say?
No, this is the night crime scene pictures from June 7th.
All right. Do you just visually looking at it, do you see holes in the window?
Yes.
Do you see a whole lot of other stuff in that picture? On the shelves, in front of it, behind it, below it, above it?
Yes.
All right, if you wouldn't, please continue on to the next slides. I'm going to go to your exhibit 45. It's going the other way, towards the end of it. Right there, or 44 is fine. All right, so I think you testified that you kind of visually looked through the hole in the window and kind of aligned your eye with the tree outside. Is that kind of how it went?
No,
You said you, correct me if I'm wrong, you can tell me in a second, but didn't you say you lowered your head to where you perceived a chest wound would be and looked out the window and tried to align it with that defect?
yes.
Okay. So the only thing I missed was lowering your head, right?
Right,
You lowered
and I
yourself
didn't
down.
do it at the window. I did it in the middle of the room.
Now, we've already established you have no training, experience, or expertise in shotguns. Is that correct?
Well, maybe you need to explain a little bit more.
Well, what do you have any formal training, formal expertise, formal education in how shotguns work, how shotgun projectiles work, and what they do after leaving the end of that barrel? Do you have any formal training, expertise, certifications, anything?
Well, not formal training, but I've done a lot of study, and I've also tested shotguns, and I've fired many shotguns before. I understand what happened to the pellets, and this particular pellet is one of the pellets that would have passed through Paul.
All right. What's the spread of a shotgun pellet exiting a shotgun barrel? What's the spread every 1 inch?
Well, it's going to vary based on the choke and the ammunition, but for this one, it's pretty clear that the spread is about the size of a window because the muzzle of the shotgun was maybe, let's call it 3 feet inside the door. It's a 10-foot long room. So at 7 feet, the spread of these pellets after passing through a person, the spread of them is probably, that window maybe 26 inches wide. So that's going to be the spread. Obviously, there can be some deflection of the pellets as they pass through the body of the victim.
Would that be a variable?
Sure.
Okay. So do you know the spread of a shotgun every yard? How much it spreads, the cone? Do you know how much it spreads per yard?
What kind of choke?
Any choke, any gauge?
I don't
Do
know.
you
the number.
know?
I don't know the number off
Okay,
the top of my
you
head.
don't know. Do you even know it, not even off the top of your head, without looking it up?
I would have to look it up.
Okay. And do you know the range of fire for 10 feet, what that spread is? In centimeters, do you know? Or inches, well, either.
I don't have this committed to memory. I would look it up.
Is that even something you've ever known, or is that something you would have to look up?
Like I said before, I have tested such things before and
Not
I've
asking
certainly
for what you
read
tested.
literature. But again, it's not something that I have committed to memory. Again, this, if you wanted to know something like that, if that was helpful in this particular case, then what you would do is then you would go to the literature and find those answers. But I don't have that memorized.
Well, aren't you rendering an opinion by drawing a line, by saying somehow that exited the shotgun? I mean, we saw the pictures with you standing there with your shotgun up and we see this line. Are you not giving an opinion of its exit?
I'm giving an opinion that a pellet from that shotgun followed that line and struck the
And
tree.
yet you don't even know the cone and the rate of expansion of a shotgun. How can you give that opinion?
You don't need to know that.
Okay.
So because what you have here, you got a hole in the window and we have a slide for it. There's a hole in the window. There's a impact mark on the tree. That pellet traveled a straight distance between those 2 points, and 2 points forms a line. You don't need to know the spread. I mean, that's actually what happened. Was a pellet came out of that gun, it passed through the victim, it went through a hole in the window, and it hit the tree.
How do you know then? How do you know it passed through the victim? How do you know that?
Well, it has 9 pellets in the shotgun.
Mhm.
Paul had 1 pellet in his shoulder. Sled recovered 7. I recovered 9. So I recovered the last pellet.
All right, so how do you know that? How do you know that? What are you basing that on? What you just testified to, what are you basing that on?
Well, when I looked at the sled records, they found 7 pellets, or that went through his body. They didn't find all the pellets, but he had 8 entrance wounds. He had 7 exit wounds. They found 1 pellet in his body, so that's 8. But we know the manufacturer puts 9. When I went to the crime scene in October 19 of 2021, the 9th buckshot pellet was in the window frame.
How do you know that was the 9th buckshot pellet that went through? Did you analyze it?
Well,
Did you analyze it?
I didn't analyze it,
Okay.
but
Are you assuming?
Objection, Your Honor. Not allowing him to answer the question. He said, I didn't analyze it, but, and then he interrupted him.
I didn't hear the but. Go ahead.
Oh, so the window got shot, right? Most of the pellets went through the window. Some of the pellets went through the little white parts of the window. There was 1 pellet that SLED didn't recover, and the reason is it was under kind of the lip. You know how where you pick up on a window, there's a thing where you put your fingers. It was under that, but still there. So you have a pattern of buckshot pellets like this big. And so you got 9 holes basically, or 8, because there was 1 pellet left in the victim, right? So
How many?
9 minus the 1, so you have 8. There are 8 holes in that window. In my world, that's a very high probability that those are the pellets that came from the buckshot that injured Paul Murdaugh.
2 slides forward. 2 slides forward. What's this big thing here at the bottom? That big opening. Exhibit 47.
Are you talking about the missing glass?
Yeah, what is that?
It's missing glass.
All right. How many pellets went through there?
I'd have to go back and look at my notes, but I counted for every pellet, except for the one that was missed by the crime scene investigators, which is under the.
Let's talk about that. How many grains was the pellet you located on the windowsill?
I never weighed it.
Again, how do you know it came from there? Do you really know it came from there, or are you assuming it came from there?
Well, the
What do you
window
know?
got shot with buckshot and there's 1 missing pellet. Again, in my world, there's a very high confidence level that that missing pellet is there.
Is that the same confidence level that you're using for all these other opinions? That
Yeah.
you found a pellet?
All my opinions are at a very high confidence
Okay.
level. Yes.
Well, we're going to go through them.
We're
The
going to
line
get to
here,
them.
we got.
I object to
Sorry.
that question. We're going to get to them. That's what he said.
All right. Well, of course, sustains objection to the comment.
The rope here, this orange rope, is that the one that continues back to the tree?
Yes.
All right. Do you have any formal training in what a projectile does if it strikes anything, be it human flesh or glass, or any of the other items that would have been located? Do you have any training in that?
Again, not formal training, but it obeys the laws of physics, and I've tested it myself, and I've studied impacts. That's a big part of what I do.
Have you done a test where you shot shotguns through glass, through wood, and through a human body, and then measured where they ended up? Have you done those tests?
No, you don't need to test it because you can just look and see what happened to it.
So is the answer no?
I didn't do any testing with the shotgun here, but why would you need to test? Because I think we got the same slide up there. Would you agree with me? Well, I can't ask you a question, but that pellet right there went through that window and it lodged in a tree or damaged the tree. I don't need to test that because that's just what happened.
All right, is it your opinion that it can only be that pellet? There's no other possibility? No other possibility? Is that your opinion?
Well, I'm not saying that there might be some highly lower probability, but if you stand in that room and we have holes, and just like you've shown, they're scattered all over that window, and you look in the direction of the damage to the tree where Paul was injured, that is the only one. And it's just I don't think it really matters one way or the other. All I can say is that I think the shot went through Paul in the manner that I presented it today.
Okay.
It really doesn't matter to me all that much which pellet went through which hole.
And I just want to be clear, you have no formal training in this, no pathological training, correct?
I am not a pathologist.
But you opine that you believe it went through Paul and then exited the window and struck that tree, but you have no formal training in any of that, correct? No pathology, no firearms, no shotgun specific training other than anecdotal shooting a shotgun? None of that, no formal trainings.
I
Is
would
that correct?
I would disagree with all of that because again, it doesn't take a pathologist. There's a small entry wound into Paul's chest. So all 9 pellets enter. 1 remains in his body. 8 leave his body.
You are sitting
Right.
here opining
And
about
so-
pathology. Is that correct?
I don't see how that's pathology. That's simple math.
Okay.
It's 9 minus 1 is 8.
Exhibit, I don't know what page this is, exhibit 81 or 80? All right, reverse it. We'll start there. Go back if you wouldn't mind, couple. Yeah, right here. Did you take this picture?
No.
How many inches does that look like he is tall?
Well, you can't tell how tall he is because of the way this picture's
And
taken.
what does it look like?
This shows his shoulder 64 inches.
What about his head?
You can't tell.
You can't see a number at the top of there?
No, because you'd have to be above the top of his head or right in line with the top of his head. The only thing you can glean from this picture is that his shoulder is 64 inches above the floor.
All right, I'm going to ask you about use of Faro. Are you the one who actually operates the Faro equipment?
I do, but in this particular time, somebody else did.
And did your equipment, has it been calibrated recently?
Yes, we calibrate every year.
Every what? Sorry.
Every year.
Did you actually operate it this night?
No, I believe Michael
Or this
Whitley,
day, whatever it
who's a biomedical engineer in my office, I believe he was the one that day that was doing the scanning.
is. You described Faro as the as a sort of a time of flight laser. Is that your testimony?
Yes, it uses a laser and it creates points. It creates a point cloud.
Is it fair to say that it's not actually a time of flight laser, it's a phase-based laser? Would that be more accurate?
I have no idea.
Okay, so you don't know?
I don't know.
All right, beginning at, just toward the very beginning of the slide works. No, the first slide, just the beginning of the presentation, the defense exhibit. Yeah, like slide 1. Did you do the addition? I know that we're going to get to it, but there's some individuals you put in the Faro report. Were you the one who actually added that 3D render, or was someone else do it?
No, I had several engineers help me on this project. So Aaron Kiefer is an engineer in my office. He did a lot of the work on the point cloud. And Matt Kiefer, actually his brother, did work with taking those scanned people and turning them into shooters. So I would say 5 or 6 engineers in my office have worked on this particular project.
All right. What we're seeing here is a quail, what's called the quail pen. Is that your understanding?
Yes.
And again, this is not your picture. This was the one taken from the night of the incident.
This is a crime scene picture the night of the murders.
And next exhibit, please, exhibit 63. Would this be a close-up of that?
Yes.
And the panel here, that's a paper product. I think you already testified to it, but that's a paper type product.
Yes.
You can actually see it's like bending, warped because it got wet.
Yes.
So it's pretty thin.
Yes.
All right, and the next slide, please. Now, this is what's purported to be a projectile hole. Is that your understanding as well?
Yes, that is a projectile hole.
And you testified, I think you testified about the, what, you tell me, what did you call this indentation on the right side of that hole?
I called it a white mark. The bullet's coming in at 41 degrees, kind of from the right. So that represents where the tip of the bullet first touched the cardboard or the fiber board.
Do you, and I think you already testified this, but you have no formal training or experience or certifications in crime scene investigations. Is that correct?
I've answered that. It all comes from experience and my education.
And are you aware that there's a margin of error for the angles that may be measured in a projectile, especially if it's a soft paper product?
Sure. There can be, and also depends on how you measure it. So I took what Special Agent Worley measured. Like I said before, it looked like our angle varied a little bit based on it didn't match up with the other physical evidence. That's why I picked a range. I picked a range of 1.5 to 3 degrees.
Keep going. Next one, please. And right here, we're seeing a metal dowel. Is that your understanding what that is?
I don't know if it's metal or fiberglass, but it's some type of material like that that's going to be straight.
And on top of it is an angle measurer. Is that
Yes.
fair to say? And they're sitting on top of that hole, which is essentially a paper product. Is that right?
Yes.
And no projectile was actually recovered from this direction of shot. Is that correct? Is that your
That's
understanding?
That is my understanding.
All right. If you wouldn't mind skipping forward to Exhibit 35. How tall is that doghouse at its highest point?
It's probably going to be about 4 feet tall.
What are you relying on when you say that?
This is Special Agent Worley's notes.
Does your Ferroscan make measurements of items? I think you testified to that.
It does. If you wanted me to give you my measurement of it, I would, have to open it up. It might take a while if you want to take a break.
So you don't know off the top of your head?
I do not have the doghouse height memorized.
All right, moving forward. And I think we saw here, this is the entry spot of the projectile into the doghouse. Is that your understanding?
Yes.
Okay. Moving forward. Moving forward. And this again would be the same thing, a rod, but this time in a more firm. You would agree the wood in this case is much more firm than the coil pen paper product, right?
Yes, it's thicker.
And the bullet, which appeared to have gone through the doghouse and was recovered from inside, is that your understanding, having reviewed the crime scene?
Yes.
Crime scene reports?
Yes.
And do you have any formal study, experience, training, or otherwise on what a bullet might do when it strikes wood or whatever the interior of the dog pen held, including the earth?
Well, again, it's the same line of questioning. It would be based on my experience. I can't say that I've ever done any specific testing for wood. I've certainly reviewed papers and literature concerning such, but typically I don't go into that area of ballistics. I look more at impact marks and then just the flight path of the bullet, because that's just physics.
And then I'm going to fast forward to some of your Faro images. If you wouldn't mind, keep skipping forward a little bit more. Keep going, please. All right, here in these the the body that's laying there covered in a sheet, that was added after the fact. That's not part of the Ferroscan, is that right?
That is correct. That was added as well as the evidence markers.
All right, and I know the markers we see on this picture is just representative. There's the placards, and is this the one where you tried to merge kind of what the placards were with the Ferroscan?
Yes,
And the little circular X's, is that the computer assisted drawing that you made based on the measurements performed by Special Agent Worley?
that's correct.
All right, if you would mind scoot forward to where we start with these green lines. There you go. All right, and we're looking at exhibit, it doesn't even say, but exhibit with the two lines spread out. Is that the representative of the two different angles that were noted on the quail pen?
Yes.
So do you know which one's which? Which one's the 1 degree and which one's the 3?
Well, the 3 degree is going to slope towards the ground quicker. So that would be the bottom line, and then the 1.5 slopes less, it's more gradual slope. So it would be the top line.
Going forward 1. And here's where you inserted a 3D person as a 5'2" person. Is that who you inserted there?
Yes.
Okay. And you chose to insert a 5'2" individual shooting from the hip in that manner that aligns with that green line. Is that what you did?
Yes.
And nowhere on here is any other individual on that green line. Is that correct? You didn't put any other images here. You only chose to put a 5'2" individual slinging a gun on his hip.
Well, that's what matches. If the person was any taller, then they would have to be towards the quail pen. If they were any shorter, then they would be behind the shooter. Or the shooter would be in a different posture.
And do you have any idea if a bullet can ricochet?
Of course.
They can, right?
Yes.
If they hit something.
Yes.
And you don't know, because we didn't recover that bullet, but you don't know if that was a ricochet. Is it possible?
It could be possible, but I don't see any evidence from the crime scene investigation that it was a ricochet.
Okay, but it's possible, right?
I think it's very unlikely because of the hole in the side of the quail pen. Usually when a bullet ricochets, it'll get upset. So the hole in the quail pen should have been bigger.
So the shooter, according to your lines here, the shooter could have been anywhere on that line. Is that correct? Anywhere on that line.
Yes.
All right, if we keep going. This is just another one showing them same posture, just on different points of those lines. Is that accurate?
Yes.
So as long as that's gun, and we'll not worry about the 5'2", 11-year-old, but if anyone's on that line, it could have been accurate, right? If that gun is anywhere on that line, according to you, it could have been accurate. Is that right? It could have
Yes,
been that
and-
shot.
Yes. and
Anywhere.
That's what I explained is that the line by definition establishes where the weapon is. Then the next step would be to figure out where the person is, or where the shooter
I
is.
just want to be clear. Anywhere from this point all the way, I guess, until it hits it would eventually hit the ground, right?
Correct.
Anywhere until it hits the ground, somewhere back behind where the bodies are located. It's your testimony that is consistent with what you're seeing.
Yes.
As long as that gun is on that line.
Yes.
So we can just remove the 11-year-olds from the equation. As long as that gun's on that line, it fits with what you're saying your mathematics is saying, is lines up. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And you didn't provide any renders of any other adult-sized human beings perhaps kneeling, did you?
Repeat that?
You didn't do any other renders along these lines of an adult-sized human being kneeling on the ground while shooting, did you?
No, what I did do is consider that because, I mean, obviously from your question, you kind of can see that in your mind. Okay.
I'm just asking for a yes or no.
Well, I did. Let me explain.
He's attempting to answer the question. Again.
Okay, so what I did for that question, because I figured that you would ask me it, but what I did was at 1 foot increments from the quail pen, all the way out to 60 feet. And at 60 feet, you're getting pretty close to where that line goes underground. It actually goes underground about 73 feet, okay? So what I did was I looked at the height of the shooter's hand, just like we did this morning in front of the jury. And the other thing I looked at was where the center of the shell casings, the empty casings were, okay? And I looked in a 12-foot circle around the shell casings, like the center of those shell casings, figuring that everything that I've seen, typically these rifles are going to be 8, 10, 12 feet, big variable. It's just, just a rough number. This is what I did though. First thing you look at is that Alex is 76 inches tall. I measured to his knee is 25 inches. So that means that if he went down on one knee, his shoulder is still 51 inches above the ground. And if he shouldered the rifle in a kneeling position, he still can't make the quail shot because the muzzle would be above where the hole is. So that's number one. So the more you back him up, then it just gets more and more improbable. So then what I said was this. So I looked at this, and the height of the shooter's hand, whoever the shooter was in whatever posture they were in, was between, assuming a 12-foot, big 12-foot radius circle, so however big that is, 24 feet circle around the shell casings. The shooter's hand is 16.2 to 27.6 inches above the ground. So that's basically 2 feet above the ground. So that's why it only fits. You said 11-year-old kid, but it only fits with a short person or with some bizarre shooting posture that doesn't match an aiming position or a normal shooting position or just an abnormal shooting position. That's where I'm coming from and I invite you, with the blackout here, if you want to, try to put this gun 27.6 to 16.2 inches and tell me that that's not somebody that's very low to the ground.
Answer me this. How far off the ground is that gun right there in the 12-year-old's hand?
Which one?
He's never said 12-year-old.
Objection is overruled.
Which shooter?
Doesn't matter.
There's no record, nothing in the record about a 12-year-old shooting this gun.
Objection is overruled.
Let's go with the back guy. I'll call him the far shooter.
12-year-old. How high is that gun?
So he is 33 feet from the quail pin. And if you look at that, which is the 1.5 at 33. Yep, the bottom of his hand is gonna be like right there at that 28-inch mark.
Where's the line located? Right there, the line where the barrel, according to you, is
At 33 feet, the muzzle,
the muzzle.
33 feet for the rear shooter. Uh, 39.6.
39 inches.
39.6.
39 inches.
Yep.
Do you have a tape measure? Oh, here we go. Inches right there.
Yeah.
If we back it up 10 feet, what's the distance? What's the green line at? 10 feet back, so 40 feet.
It would be 36.5.
36.5. That's 3 feet, 3 feet 5.5 inches. Is that right?
That is correct.
My finger, that look about right?
Yes.
Right there?
Yes.
Right there.
Yes.
But we got this. We got your renders that you went with are these two, right?
Yes.
Okay. If you wouldn't fast forward a little bit. Right here, okay. So now we got, what's the angle of this doghouse that you calculated?
That's 14 degrees.
All right, and the shooter, the little youth there, the youth is how far away from that?
.4 feet.
And how high off the ground is that green line where he's standing? Little guy.
The muzzle is 29 inches above the ground,
29 inches.
maybe 30.
30 inches. So right here, 30?
Yes.
So 30 inches when you're up close, right next to that doghouse. So what happens then when you back? I see the line, it's going upwards. So what happens when you back up? I mean, soon it's going to be over the little guy's head, right?
Yes.
But what happens if you're not such a little guy? If you back up, I don't know, let's back us up 5 feet. What happens?
Let's see. So that would be about 47.4.
47.4. Let's see. That about right?
Yes.
I can bring it closer. 40,
Yes.
you see it?
Yes.
Okay. 47.4. It's right there.
Yes.
I'm glad we could demonstrate those heights to the jury. Thank you. If you wouldn't fast forward a little bit more about, it doesn't have an exhibit number, but like 5 slides. Right. Right. Yeah. Right here's fine. That's good. That's good. Now, and I just want to be clear, you talk about casings. It's cartridge casings, and you're aware that shotguns have shells and rifles have cartridges. Is that correct? Is that correct? Is that your understanding?
I call it a rifle cartridge, but a rifle cartridge would be the bullet and the casing and the gunpowder inside the casing, but I call them rifle casings.
Okay. Well, I mean, before you just called it shell casings, I just want to be clear. All right. So and you talked about, I know you spent some time talking about the ejection of cartridge casings from a rifle or an AR style rifle. But you have no training or experience in that other than the studies you've personally conducted. Is that right?
That's correct. In
Okay.
literature, which again, for this rifle, it's supposed to be 3 o'clock to 4:30, which is 45 degrees behind, but it can be forward.
And
It can be straight out to the side.
and I'm just tapping into common sense here, but you weren't at the scene in the night of the murders. Is that right?
I was not there.
And so is it possible that cartridge casings were moved?
Yes.
Is it possible that cartridge casings were ejected in an unorthodox manner?
Yes.
Is it possible that cartridge casings were ricocheted off of something, hit something and ricocheted?
Yes.
Okay. So where they laid, and this is just, again, tapping into common sense, not your engineering background, but where they laid may not necessarily be where they fell that night. Is that fair to say?
Yes. You're looking for just the area. For instance, if you're thinking about a shooting position 60 feet away, it makes no sense. But anywhere in that 24 feet that I'm talking about, yes, because there's casings there.
And here, what are we showing here? Remind me again what this, and I think there's one before it too, an exhibit before. What are we doing here with the intersection of the 3 lines? What are you saying?
I'm saying that the 2 shots made in 2 different directions can be made from approximately the same spot.
Does that assume, though, that someone's shooting from approximately the same spot? Does that assume that right there? This is assuming someone's in the general same area when they shoot.
Well, I used a constant height shooter, put them on the trajectories, and they end up in the same spot.
Is it possible that someone shoots from one position and then moves to another position before they shoot again? Is that possible?
Sure.
And along your lines, it's still, it's very possible that someone could have shot over here, and again, they were maybe a bigger person than the 12-year-old, and someone could have then moved before they shot again. Is that a possibility? Is that possible?
Of course. Well, I mean, that's what this slide depicts, is the shooter moving.
Fred, is it possible that they were back here and moved maybe just a little bit more than the 2 feet you put on your drawing?
No, they would have to change their shooting posture. That's kind of the whole point is, it's like, for instance, you know, if you want to, like your line of questioning, let's say that the shooter is laying down or on one knee, then stands up and shoots from the hip. I don't know if that's really consistent with a moving shooter, but it's my understanding from what people have determined and what I've heard in expert reports from the state is that they think the shooter was moving. So I was thinking that it doesn't have to be, but what's most likely is somebody is walking around shooting a gun.
Okay. Again, you weren't there. You have no firearms training. Is that right? Or certifications? Or crime scene training or certifications. Is that right?
I was not there.
So this is your best guess. Is that what it is?
No, that is not a guess.
So it
That
couldn't
is
be.
based, let me
Go ahead.
finish. That is based on all of the engineering principles, the physical evidence that was collected by both myself and Special Agent Worley. That is the physical evidence. Now, as you've done today, you can think about alternatives, and there very well can be alternatives, but you have to look at how likely the alternatives are. And that's what I'm doing here. There's always going to be variables. You can move things around, but I think, as I've tried to get across today, is that you draw a conclusion when you look at the evidence.
And you're here to testify to these jurors that your most likely answer is that it was a 12-year-old, two 12-year-olds at 5'2".
Your Honor, there's been no testimony that two 12-year-olds are involved in this anyway, misstating the facts.
Sustain the objection.
You're saying, though, that 5'2", which we can all guess approximates what size individual or age of individuals, that's your best guess of what went on that night?
It's not a guess. And again, it's not two individuals. It could be one person moving slightly there. But that is not a guess. That is my opinion. And I've tried to explain it to the court as best as I possibly can.
Just to be clear, I'm going to move to exhibit 50, I believe it's 53, right there. Did this line account for a bullet either going through glass, other objects, or a human being?
Well, as we've discussed before, I would not anticipate any deflection through the glass, but there could have been some deflection through the body. So what that would account for is that where I'm standing or where that string is could have moved a little bit going through the body, but I think everybody's agreed that the shotgun is inside the door. So that would limit how far you could move the shotgun side to side based on deflection due to contacting something solid inside the body.
All right, so I didn't hear a yes or no. Did it account for the projectile traveling through a human body, glass, or any other objects that were then located in that room that night? Does it account for that? Yes or no?
No, it doesn't account for it, but you could see, how that has to change or could change, because the amount that you could move the shotgun around from that position is limited by the opening in the doorway.
And same thing for the green laser lines we saw earlier. Does that account for the projectile passing through a human body, wood, any other object that it passed through? Did your calculations account for that trajectory?
Well, that path is a straight line path. It could have passed through a human body. It passed through the layers of the quail pen, but it's traveling straight at that point.
Did your calculations, I'm going to ask it again because I need a yes or no answer. Did your calculations account for the projectiles in the other examinations, the green line ones? Did it account for the projectiles passing through an item such as wood or a human body? Did it account for that?
No, I did not put there that the projectile somehow interacted with anything else and was deflected.
All right, I'm going to go over a few variables if you wouldn't mind. So variables in doing all these calculations are, would you agree, it's where the gun was held? That's a variable.
Not for the trajectories.
So you won't concede that where the gun was held is a variable in a calculation such as yours.
Which calculation?
It doesn't matter. We're talking about either your shotgun calculation or your rifle one. Was where the gun held a variable that you have to account for in making this determination? Where the gun was held physically?
Not for the shot trajectories.
All right. Will you concede then that it was a variable in the AR-300 blackout scenario?
No, the shot trajectories, it doesn't matter where the gun is being held.
So where the gun's held in your mind makes no difference.
No, the gun is on the shot trajectory. I think
All
I've
right.
explained that.
Is it a variable of how the gun was held?
No.
Not a variable. Is it a variable if the party shooting was moving?
Again, no, the barrel of the gun was on that shot line, in my opinion.
Is it a variable if the party that the bullet would have potentially passed through was moving? Is that a variable?
No.
Is it a variable to you if the party was jumping or ducking? Is that a variable to you?
No.
Is it a variable if the party was maybe turning side to side? Is that even a variable?
Not for what I've done.
Okay, so you're saying no to everything I just asked, and all of those, you would agree, all of those variables that I listed include motion. Is that right?
Yes, those would all be if you were trying to figure out the orientation of the person that was shot, which is something that I did not do, and that's something I don't do. It's not my field of expertise.
Anything further? All right, well, let's stand while we're indulging. Okay.
All right, and further to the variables, I think you just said is it not a variable to you? Trying to ask this as clearly as possible. Sorry, strike that. Is it a variable if the person that is being shot is moving? Is that a variable to you?
That is not a variable to me.
And is it a variable to you if the person who's doing the shooting is moving?
That is not a variable to me.
Would you agree, though, in general, people do move?
Yes, in my experience, people move.
That's it. No further questions.
So much to straighten out. let's deal with his last questions. About the variables. You're an expert. I'm going to give you a hypothetical real quick. Bullet hole 10 feet up, bullet hole 5 feet up. What does that tell you?
And the bullet's descending.
Right. And if you put a dowel through that, would you see where it possibly came from and where it possibly went?
Yes.
Okay. Basically, it's a line, correct?
Yes.
So what does knowing where the gun was being held have to do with any of that?
It has no bearing on the physics of the flight of the bullet. It may have something to do with maybe where the shooter was positioned relative to the weapon, right? Or, if some other variable, but I'm not testifying about those subject matters.
Right. So all the, well, let me ask you this. The data you relied on for this trajectory, the trajectories, was that generated by SLED?
Yes.
And so did they indicate any evidence of ricochet?
No.
Did they indicate any evidence of bullet passing through a person?
No.
Didn't they test the one bullet they found in the dog shed for DNA and tissue or some sort of organic matter?
Yes.
Didn't find any.
No.
So you're basically just saying this is the line. Based on the SLED, Agent Worley putting a dowel through and then figuring out the angles, correct?
Yes.
The two people you put here are based on the angle from the quail pen going down. It was an upward shot, correct?
You cannot lead the witness, though I've heard no objections to it.
I haven't heard any objections either, Your Honor.
Well, the court is objecting. You cannot lead the witness.
Trying to cut to the chase, I apologize. You were asked a question about the number of pellets. Did you review Agent Worley's report of her notes based on her visit to the location on July 16, 2021?
Yes.
Let me hand you these to see if it refreshes your memory. You go through those for just a moment, please.
Okay.
Let me see it, please.
Right.
Any objection to putting this in evidence?
No objection.
And I have the Elma. I'm sorry. Offer this in evidence, Your Honor.
Submitted without objection.
Let's go tape by tape. This is the tape one, and then we'll go. Okay, how about take it down a little bit? Oh, no, that's okay, that's fine, that's fine. So What is being recorded in this document and by who? It's a SLED report, right?
Yes, it's just a listing of the observations that
Okay.
Special Agent Worley was observing at the crime scene.
Okay, so let's go down to the bottom of this page, okay? What's there, that shadow? What's that about? Okay, so tell me what that says. What does that mean?
Those are the following bullet defects in feed room: the doghouse, the small animal cage, and the workshop were scaled, labeled, and photographed.
Okay, so what is the defect A, B, C, D, and E?
Those are 5 projectiles in the feed room window.
And I think we previously heard those are buckshot pellets.
Yes.
You can't lead the witness.
Okay. Go to the next page, please. So how many is that?
5.
Okay, keep going. Top of the page, please. Okay, and so it can, what happens here? Defect F, G, and M.
F and G are projectile entered the interior side of the window. Defect K is a possible defect in the exterior side of the window screen.
And that accounts for how many pellets?
You got 7.
Okay, and how many pellets were there?
9.
Okay. Is this where you got your information that you were asked about by the state?
Yes, and I mean, there was a report by Tom Bevel. He talked about the evidence. The evidence been listed. So there are several documents that you could go to find the stuff that was collected at the site.
Okay, and then going down doghouse, this would be, what is that? What does that cover?
Maybe push it down.
Push it down just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Yeah, the doghouse was, there was the entrance defect, then there was a possible entrance defect. It was like a really small hole. No projectile recovered. And then there was a projectile entered the lower middle area, the southeast exterior side, exited the interior side, and entered the bedding. And the projectile was previously collected from the bedding.
Okay, so it says a flight path rod was placed through defects 1 and something,
I think that's I and I1.
I and I1,
Yes,
okay, and was documented with photographs. You've seen those photographs?
I have.
An angle finder determined the vertical angle of the. I'm just reading, I'm not leading him. I'm reading the document that's in evidence. I'm publishing it.
All right.
Thank you. An angle finder determined the vertical angle of the flight path to be approximately 76 degrees, and a protractor, and a plumb bob determined the horizontal angle to be approximately 84 degrees. Is that right?
Yes.
Was that or was that inconsistent with the photographs you saw taken by Agent Worley of her performing those tests?
I think it's off the horizontal angle, I think, was off a degree.
A degree,
Right.
based on the photograph.
Right.
But you weren't there,
No.
so you're looking at a photograph and saying it's off a degree, but maybe she had a better perspective.
Objection, commentary.
Could she had a better perspective than you did than what you saw in the photograph?
Yes.
Okay. Small animal cage. That says defect J, projectile entered the exterior side of the cardboard on the southwest end of the cage, exited the interior sides of the cardboard and the chicken wire. Defect J1 traveled through chicken wire on the back wall of the cage and entered the southeast wall of the workshop. Defect J2 exited the interior side of the workshop wall, defect J, and struck a vertical shelf beam that was perpendicular to the wall. A flight path rod was placed through defects J to J2 and was documented with photographs. An angle finder determined the vertical angle of the flight path to be approximately 87 degrees and the horizontal approximately 41 degrees. And is that consistent with the photographs you saw?
Yes, except for the one that's 3 degrees.
Right,
And
that's
then-
3 degrees.
And then
you
there
saw-
was one with 1.5, and again, for the
And
reasons
that's
I've
why we
stated.
see the two paths. You do 1 at 1.5, 1 at 3. Now, in any of this, did you read anything about not quite done yet, No, I'm done with that one. What about ricochet or any biologic material on anything or anything that indicated pass through a person or a wall or anything? Was there anything recorded by their agent that would indicate any of that? That was collected by their agents that would indicate any of that?
No.
Okay. Now, what do you know what this is?
This is Agent Worley's drawing of the window.
Okay. And what does it indicate?
It indicates the 7 buckshot pellets that passed through the window.
Okay. How about let's see the other one. What is this?
It's another drawing showing where the 7 buckshot pellets went through the window.
Okay. One's from inside, one's from outside, or what?
Yes.
Okay. So there are 7 buckshot, and which one of these is the one you measured through?
If that's the outside,
Yeah. Maybe it is.
I measured through a defect B1,
What does
which
that
would
say
be
at
the
top?
upper leftmost.
Exterior side, yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
So I went through B1.
okay. And is this consistent with what you saw?
Yes.
Okay, so you didn't get to look at this until October, correct?
Of 2022.
22, right. Now, these drawings, their examination was done in June and July of 21, within a month of the murders, correct?
Yes.
And what you had to go on basically was photographs, right?
Objection to the leading room.
What, if anything, did you have to rely on to do the analysis?
Well, the information and data that SLED collected because.
I'm sorry, who collected it?
SLED,
Okay, and,
right, because they were there very early on and I was not. And then also went and took a look at the physical evidence and I found some stuff there that was helpful to my investigation itself. So it wasn't 100% based on SLED, but a lot of this information came directly from SLED.
okay, do you know when Alex Murdaugh was charged with murder? Was it July of 22?
I don't remember.
But at some point over a year after the murders,
Yes,
okay. And you were retained and got out there within 90 days of his arrest, correct?
yes,
But they waited over a year to arrest him, correct?
yes.
So my question is, I mean, these issues raised, would the ammo that you use for your sound testing, whether you were using the same brand or some different brand, did it make any difference?
No.
Objection, no basis in his expertise.
What, if any, difference would it have made in the acoustical issues you were testing? Different ammo?
Same objection.
None. I'm sorry.
Sorry, Your Honor, was he able to, I'm sorry, was he able to
Yes,
answer that?
objection was overruled. Your answer.
Thank you.
It makes no difference. All the shotguns are right in the same range. It doesn't matter. The rifles are in the same range. Weapons of this type are not loud enough to be heard inside the house from that distance with all the variables.
Okay, you were also asked a question about how loud the sound was if you went in a laboratory. The length of the distance you said was between the kennels and the house, outside the house. And I think you said, was it 100 decibels?
Yes, it's about like 103, 104.
Okay, and he went to a chart saying that would be like a airplane at 300 meters.
Yes.
Would you be able to hear that inside the house?
Depends on what's going on inside the house, but at that level, you would just, I don't want to, it's been a long day, but it depends on where the energy of the sound is in what's called octave bands and 1/3 octave bands. So in other words, the sound of a gunshot is different than the sound of a jet airplane because it's not the same noise. So there's more to the question, but even if apples to apples, if you had that level of noise outside, which it wasn't because it wasn't a laboratory setting, it was actually only about 85 decibels outside the house, which would have been audible if you're outside. You could be a couple miles away and hear these gunshots if you were outside.
So if you were a couple miles away and you were outside not inside a house, you could hear those shots.
You could, yes.
But
You
what
know,
about-
as long as there's not a lot of traffic or you're not cutting the grass, if it was quiet and you're outside, you could hear those gunshots. You just can't hear them in the house.
Can't hear them in the house. Now, did you find any data, any reports, anything you looked at for SWAT that they did any of the trajectory calculations that you did?
No.
They did a computer simulation, right?
Or a scan. They scanned the same way I did.
And then when you look at it, we saw it 4 weeks ago, there's a sort of a flaw.
Objection sustained.
Did they do, what if any Faro did they do? Faro computer generated? Did they do one?
All I know is that they did scan the scene in July, just like I did, but I have not yet seen anything from them using their scan.
And did they, again, not again, but I want to make sure I understand this. They got the information, strike that. What if any trajectory computations did they do, SWED, the state, any FBI, anybody hired by these guys over here, do on trajectory? Did you see anything?
No.
So the first time anybody's done any trajectory calculations is you. And as you indicated, we were going through that PowerPoint last night, trying to make sure it was understandable. But sort of, one last question. Was there anything to prevent SWAT, FBI, anybody from doing the same calculations you did? Well, just two last questions. That you did, anything preventing them? Do they have any, what if any obstacles were there to SWED or FBI or one of these private people they hired doing the same thing you did?
None.
And let me get this straight. He kept talking about children 5'2". Young lady, stand up. That's a clerk in my office. She's 5'3". So
Objection is sustained.
she's not a child. That's all I'm trying to point out. She's 22.
Objection to commentary.
Objection sustained.
Apologize to the court, Your Honor. Based on your calculations and based on the assumption that somebody would be holding the rifle either at their hip or at their shoulder in a way in which you could operate that weapon, what, if any, opinion do you have as to whether that person could be Alex Murdaugh shooting into that quail pen?
It can't be.
Thank you.
I know you just answered that question, but it could be on anyone on those green lines. Is that right? Your green lines that you drew could be anyone along that green line.
That is correct.
Could be anyone who could fit along that green line. Is that true?
The weapon is on the green line. And then so, as I've tried to explain before, the next thought process is that, okay, for people of different sizes, what do they have to do to put their hands on the weapon to fire it?
Thank you.
While it's sitting on that green line.
So to be clear, is that a yes? Anyone on that green line? As long as this gun travels on that green line, it would fit anyone on that green line.
That is correct.
Thank you. And if you were down at the kennels when a shotgun was shot and a 300 blackout was shot, if you were down at the kennels, would you have heard it?
Yes.
No further questions.
You step down. And Ladies and gentlemen, that'll be it for this day. We'll resume at 9:30 tomorrow morning. Looking at it's almost 5:30 now. We'll resume at 9:30 tomorrow morning. Please do not discuss the case. Have a good evening. You just hold still while the jurors leave, since it's taking you a while to get up. Recess to 9:30.